First of all, I must admit that I am extremely nervous. Not because it's the first time in my life that I am giving a talk, but because it's the first time that I am addressing a non-medical audience, and that too a bright young kids like you, and that too coming after 3 wonderful talks. There was a talk on e-governance, there was a talk on how to turn from a student to entrepreneur, and then a beautiful video and inspiring talk on volunteering. So my job of talking to you about robotic surgery, the talk which was given to me was to talk to you about robotic surgery, but I thought that robotic surgery is like, taking you through a class which will be very boring for you. So what I thought was that let me take you through a journey as to how the surgical field has evolved in general, with a special focus on robotic surgery, and also as to how in the last 20 years the digitalization of medicine is actually changing the way the medicine is and will be practiced, and how the healthcare scenario will look maybe about 10 or 20 years down the line. It actually will be very, very different from the way we practice health today. So we'll start with this video. It's actually, a lot of you might have seen it, it's a video from Star Trek.
What's the matter with you?
Kidney dialysis.
Dialysis? My God, what is this, the Dark Ages? Here, you swallow that, and if you have any problems, just call me.
Fully functional?
Fully functional.
So did you hear that? This lady was waiting for a dialysis because her kidneys are knocked off, and this Dr. McCoy comes there and says, oh, this is medieval. You take this pill and you'll be fine. That pill went in, regenerated her kidney. There was no need for dialysis, no need for kidney transplantation. It sounds like fiction today, but friends, the possibilities which are there on the horizon today are actually going to make it happen in not too distant future. Another video.
Out of the way. Sorry, Doctor. Strict orders, not Damn it, do you want an acute case on your hands? This woman has immediate postprandial upper abdominal distension. Now, out of the way. Get out of the way.
What did you say she's got?
Cramps. Who are you? Why aren't you masked? Who are these people?
I don't know.
What the hell is that? What are you doing?
Tearing of the middle meningeal artery.
What's your degree in? Dentistry?
How do you explain slow impulse, low respiratory rate, and coma?
Fundoscopic examination.
Endoscopic examination is unrevealing in these cases.
A simple evacuation of the epidural hematoma will relieve the pressure.
My God, man. Drilling holes in his head's not the answer. The artery must be repaired. Now put away your butcher knives and let me save this patient before it's too late.
I'm gonna have you removed.
Doctor, such
Dealing with mittens.
This lady had some blood clot in the brain, and the neurosurgeons were preparing for making a hole in the skull and getting the blood out. This guy just puts a device there, it creates waves which go inside, repair the artery, clear up all the clot, and the person wakes up without any kind of surgery at all. So this is a scenario which today, at one time it was like fiction, but everything which is fiction at one time becomes reality sometime later. And a lot of these things which appeared fiction couple of years back in medicine are becoming reality, and the same way many things which might sound like fiction today will be reality 5 or 10 years down the line. So let's look at how, from where did we start as far as surgery is concerned, how far have we reached, what is possible today, and where are we headed to. If you look back into medieval history, you find evidence that there were people who were making holes in the skull. They've discovered skulls which had holes, which had evidence of healing at the periphery, which means that these people must have had some holes drilled in their head for some treatment, and they healed because there was some evidence of healing at the corner. So this was happening at that time also, and these are the kind of tools they were using at that time. Then in various parts of the world, these kind of things are available which show that these things did exist, although it was in a very crude form. And India at that time also was actually in the forefront, and especially in the field of surgery, where a gentleman by name Sushruta actually was a master plastic surgeon. He wrote a whole treatise called Sushrut Samhita, which actually describes a large number of plastic surgical procedures which are attributed to various Western people today. And this moved on, go forward 1,000 years, and then we had this age of barber surgeons who used to practice this kind of surgery in villages, with the whole village watching the spectacle. They were actually tradesmen who used to walk from village to village, town to town, and it was surgery without any kind of anesthesia, done in a central place with the whole village watching the surgery. This is the kind of picture that we have of those times. Only basic surgery was possible, and most of these actually were amputations following wars, etc. What were the problems? Obviously, infection was a major problem, blood loss was a major problem, and pain was a major problem. They had no knowledge of anatomy. They were just chopping just like that. They had no methods of controlling bleeding. These were extremely painful procedures, and there was no method of controlling. As the times passed by, we had better knowledge of anatomy, which means how the structures are there inside our body and how we can handle them. Around 1850, in Mass General Hospital, Boston, USA, ether was discovered to have anesthetic property. If you make the person inhale ether, the person goes unconscious, does not feel pain, and you can do procedures. So this was what is called the first revolution in surgery, which allowed the surgery from becoming a crude and very painful experience to a little more refined, painless experience. And thereafter, there was discovery of asepsis also. Joseph Lister is credited with discovering asepsis. He said, simple hand act of washing your hand will actually prevent these people from dying. So discovery of anesthesia, discovery of infection, and then methods of achieving blood control and knowledge of anatomy. All these things led to what is called the modern era of surgery. So surgeons started digging deeper and deeper into the body, and numerous possibilities there. So from barber surgeons of yesteryears, they actually turned to true surgeons. And sky also was not the limit, because every area started being explored by these methods. But the thing was that we used to make big incisions, and the saying at that time was, big surgeons make big incisions. So if you are a big surgeon, you will give a big cut to the patient, and that's how this surgery was practiced. Well, many times the people used to heal well, but numerous times there were problems, and we actually used to leave people more miserable than the misery they came with. And this used to happen many times. So then again, and this happened, this was the stage till about late 80s, when a new or third revolution in surgery took place, which is called minimal access surgery. And this gentleman, George Kelling in Germany, is actually credited with this development, and it happened around the world around late 80s. And what various names were given to it, you might have heard, maybe some of your relatives might have undergone some procedure where you would be told, oh, we are doing a surgery by laser. Somebody said keyhole surgery, somebody says minimal hole surgery, minimal access, numerous names are given. Basically, what it means is that instead of giving big cuts, you make small cuts, and instead of putting your hands inside, you actually put a camera, a telescope inside, an instrument. You don't look at the patient, you look at the TV monitor and carry out surgery in a kinder way. The main thing was, it was a kinder surgery. So this led to less pain, quicker recovery, and cosmetically it was far superior. So this was actually a kind of a third revolution in the field of surgery, and gallbladder was the first organ which was handled by this, and this led to a total change in the way surgeon. This actually was a paradigm shift in the way the surgeons practiced. Now this was a great development which actually changed surgery from big incisions, big surgeons, big incisions to big surgeons make small incisions. It actually was a paradigm shift, but there were problems. When we look into the patient's cavity, tummy or chest, we look with our eyes and we have a 3D vision. But when we look at the monitor only has length and height. It doesn't have depth. So we lost the depth dimension, and instead of 3D vision, we started doing surgery with 2D vision. When we feel with our hands have touch sensation. So we feel, and that's how we assess how the tissues are, and that's how we take decisions. But when we move to using long instruments which were handled by our hands from outside, which were going into the body cavity through small holes, there was touch sensation was lost. When we want to move our hand, if I want to move like this, I'll just move the hand like this. But when I'm using a long instrument, I have to do opposite movement. So there were, although there were huge advantages for the patient, but there were problems as far as doing it, this procedure is concerned, and that's why it was called patient friendly but surgeon unfriendly surgery. So this was a big development, positive development as far as patients were concerned, but there were a lot of stresses which were put on the surgeons, who of course was trying to cope with it. Nonetheless, the stress was there. So this is how it is done. I'm not putting any technical details, I'm just giving an overview so that, you know, as engineering graduates also, you just have this little bit knowledge about how these developments have taken place. A lot of times you will hear, oh, laparoscopic surgery hui, durbin wali surgery hui. This is exactly how it is done. Instead of putting your hands inside, you put these tubes through which you put a telescope on which a camera is attached, which gives the picture on the monitor. You put these long instruments. You don't look at the patient, you look at the monitor and carry out movements with your hands. It's good for the patient, but not that kind as far as the surgeon is concerned. So what was the solution? Augment the surgeon's capabilities, improve the vision from 2D to 3D, and make it easy so that the learning becomes easy and people are able to learn fast. And that's where robotics came into picture. When we talk of robotics, immediately you feel, oh, robotic surgery. Whenever I tell a patient I'm going to do robotic surgery, oh, doctor, so aap nahi karenge surgery, robot karega. Now suddenly they start thinking that maybe some humanoid robot will walk into the theater, this gentleman will be sitting in his office, that robot will do, and then they start, sir, wo uska program mein agar kuch virus aa gaya to kya ho jayega, you know, these kind of things. So we have to tell them, no, actually robotic surgery is a misnomer. It's not a robot. All of you will know, by definition, robot is a pre-programmed machine which carries out repetitive tasks that it has been programmed to do. It has no mind of its own. Still, I mean, newer robots are different, but typically an industrial robot just carries out a same task that it has been programmed to. As opposed to that, this machine is very different. Actually, the correct name is computer assisted surgery. Here, there are three components. There's something called the robotic cart, which is actually a tower on which 3-4 arms are mounted, and these arms are replica of human hand. So they have a shoulder joint, an elbow joint, a wrist joint, and multiple joints. Now this thing is actually the effector part of the robot, which actually carries out the procedure. Then there is something called a master console, where the surgeon sits, looks into a 3D viewfinder here, has a pair of joysticks into which he puts his fingers and makes movements there, and these movements are transmitted to this robotic cart through a computer assisted device. So it's actually a computer assisted surgery where surgeon sitting on the console is looking into a viewfinder, getting a 3D vision, is carrying out movements, which are then carried out inside the human body by the robot. So what we do, we put the patient under anesthesia, we put those small tubes through which the instruments go inside, and we connect these arms to those instruments. Now this is called docking. You connect the robot, the surgeon then goes, descrubs, you are not scrubbed anymore, you go and sit on the console, and then you look in the viewfinder and carry out movement. That's how robotic surgery is carried out today. Very different from general perception that some humanoid robot comes inside and does the operation. So there is no software involved as far as doing the procedure is concerned, and it's totally under the surgeon's control. So how do we do it? This is exactly how it looks here in the real life, that after the patient has been connected, you come and sit on this console, put your hand into the master. See this, your index finger and thumb both, you just manipulate these joysticks and you are looking into this viewfinder, and there is a telescope which is giving you vision here, and you do these movements which are replicated inside. The beauty is, it's precise, it's fine, there is no tiredness, and you can do work for as long as you like, and the range of movement is even better than what you have with your hand. And see how precisely you can picture. All you are doing is actually doing the same movement outside, and that movement is carried out. When we were doing laparoscopic surgery, if I want to do the movement inside like this, I have to do opposite movement outside because there is mirror imaging. So we had to unlearn the open surgery and relearn those skills, whereas this is more closer, just like open surgery. And that is why the learning curve, your ability to move from open surgery to laparoscopic surgery and move from open to robotic, this is much faster. Okay, so what it made possible? It allowed us to access a lot of inaccessible areas. It made complex operations possible because these instruments have tremendous versatility. It had steady camera vision, and it also has a filtering mechanism. You know, as we grow older, our hands start having tremors. Open surgery, it's a menace. Even laparoscopic surgery, it's a menace. But here, the company realized that a lot of old surgeons are going to practice, so they have introduced a filtering mechanism by which you can remove the filters, and even if you are doing like this, inside there will be steady movement. So it's actually plus, there is a huge surgeon comfort. You sit here comfortably and carry out the procedure, and since it's very close to open surgery, movements are similar, learning curve is faster. So what are the advantages that patients have when they undergo this procedure? They have less pain, less blood loss, they return to work much faster, which is a very important thing today, and of course we can do complex operations. So we've come a long way from that barbaric surgery stage. But are we happy and are we satisfied? No. There is still work going on. Can we still decrease the trauma of surgery? Can we do away with even these small holes that we are making and make it truly scarless surgery? And going still further, why do we have to do surgery at all? Can we not do away with surgery altogether and be able to remedy all the problems even without surgery? Is it possible? Let's just quickly look through some of the developments. What is happening is that how can we reduce the collateral damage of surgery? By more precision, better imaging, more information to process, and by using the computational power more and more. And just see how this happens. If you look at this video, these scanning mechanisms, you must be aware, ultrasound is there, CT scan is there, MRI scan is there, PET. These things are getting so powerful day by day that you can literally scan the whole patient in real time and create such fabulous images of inside that it feels as if you are actually sitting inside the cavity, and be able to even engineer those tissues. So there are whole lot of possibilities occurring. Augmented reality, wherein you add more dimensions to what the human eye has and thereby allowing more complex and better surgery to be done. This is becoming a reality. So this is augmented reality, that this surgeon who is working here has got this device here, which when he looks in the skull, he not only sees what he would have seen with his eye, but is able to see the complex anatomy of inside, which actually was provided by the CT scan, MRI, etc., etc. So you've actually given him the benefit of the eye and the MRI, CT scan, PET scan, everything put into his eyes, and now when he's seeing, he's not only seeing what is there on the surface, but he's also seeing what is there under the surface. So this augmented reality has already come into clinical use.
The peritoneal cavity was entered
Now,
through an incision
this is
in the
one
posterior
example
vaginal
of
cul-de-sac.
scarless surgery.
The
People are using
transvaginal
natural
access to the
orifices. So you
peritoneal
have
cavity
mouth,
and the
we have
introduction
vaginal
of the
opening,
double
we have
channel
rectal
gastroscope
opening.
were
So
performed
people are
under
now
laparoscopic
putting
control
tube,
by a
endoscope
2
through these
millimeter needle
openings
scope.
and carrying out procedures. So there is a procedure in which you put a scope through the mouth, which goes into the stomach. You puncture the stomach and come out. You work on the gallbladder, remove the gallbladder, pull it into the stomach and bring it out through your mouth, and then just close that opening. It's called notes. It's the reality. So so we had big surgeons make big surgeons make small incisions, and in future the talk will be good surgeons make no incisions. So you do an incisionless surgery. And then moving one step beyond, why surgery at all? Why not just the way we saw in the Star Trek video? She has a bad kidney, why dialysis, why kidney transplant? Give her a pill which goes inside, regenerates the tissue, and she's back to normal. So we have cancer cells, we have other kind of cells, and the work now is you prevent, you do lifestyle modifications, you detect things early and you treat. Actually eliminate the disease rather than concentrating efforts on treating the disease. So there are low-cost gene analysis, there are computational bioinformatics, internet connectivity, and all these things which are making it possible. And one tool which is helping hugely is what all of you have in your hands or in your pocket, and that is this device. There are more than 2,000 apps available which relate to medical field, which are for your iPhone. And all of them can do huge number of things. This is just a snapshot of some of them, and these are available. This is one device which was one app which became available recently, where you actually have a strip. You just put a drop of urine on this strip, connect it to the phone, and it will do some analysis to know what kind of diseases you have. So numerous such apps are becoming available, which are actually going to change the way we practice medicine. Then there is this one which actually can be attached, which is available in US, can be attached to your iPhone and can give you your blood sugar level. No coding is necessary. You just take a sample, you bring it here. This is how they do it. So it's an iPhone to which this device is attached. You just make a tiny function, get a drop of blood, put it on a strip, connect it there, and your phone becomes your blood glucose monitor. Or there are now these electronic stethoscopes available. Instead of the usual stethoscope, you put it there, it will not only auscultate, it will also make whole lot of diagnosis, and you connect it to your iPhone and you can have your ECG or other things sent anywhere in the world, diagnosis made, treatment conveyed to you on phone itself. Medical electronic records is something which is existing. Most of the hospitals now are going paperless. They have no paper. You go, you have a record created, whole of life, that file will be there. A step further, a chip is there on which every data related to you from birth till date will be entered. You go anywhere, that chip is there, and any doctor anywhere in the world can have the entire medical history of you in a second. So there are a whole lot of these apps which are already available. Now there are wearable devices which are coming in the market. You wear a t-shirt, that t-shirt has got sensors which will be monitoring your heart rate, your blood glucose levels, your body temperature, whole lot of activities and will be warning signals in case something is going wrong. Then there are now mirrors being developed which can actually make diagnosis. There is already one in the market, and you just stand in front of that mirror and it can display your heart rate, your body temperature and your blood glucose levels. And in future you will have these devices. All you need to do is just go there and they'll give your entire parameters on display there immediately. These are not friction, I'm talking you, these are all devices which are there either in prototype stage or already out there in the market. So which way are we headed? We have a lot of information overload, and this can lead to breakdown, but we have to do intelligent integration of all these developments which are occurring and convert them into appropriate actions which ultimately will lead to breakthrough. So how has integration helped us? Just one example of, sometimes people have injuries in their spinal cord and they become paralyzed. It's a nightmare to have that. But now there is a device, there is a chip available which can be implanted into that area in the brain where the damage has occurred, which can allow these paralyzed people to be able to use that arm. And just see this kind of thing. Now this is an amputee. This person has not used hand, but they can put a new hand, and this new hand is not controlled by.
Boy, I can't wait to have you near. I gotta hurry, hurry, hurry now, quick, quick. I gotta turn this car around.
Now this movement that you saw, this movement was not controlled by any robotic arm or any device. This movement was done by the person thinking to do that movement. So this was artificial arm which was working like the real arm. And how does this happen? It's connected to the brain, so the thoughts actually become the initiating point for starting the movement. This is already in use. Similarly, there are now devices available which can enhance the human capability. Just see this device which is actually being used by people in US Army. Now they have to use a lot of equipment. A lot of things they have to carry, which actually is sometimes weighing heavy. They have these. Oh, sorry. These devices are called exoskeletons. They are actually wearable bionics, which you add on. And they act as exoskeleton, which will allow you. So this guy has got these devices which actually helps him in walking even with such a heavy load, thereby reducing the stress on the person. Now that's one example where the human capacity is being enhanced. But there is another wonderful example, is this lady who is a paraplegic. She has not walked for 19 years. She's been on a wheelchair. But now she's got this device which will be controlled by a chip in the brain, and she'll be able to use it not by mechanical movement but by using the electronic signals integrated to thought process. She'll be able to walk as she thinks of walking. Then another wonderful application, nanomedicine. All of you are aware. I'm sure each one of you will know about it more than I know. But then there are these nano robots which are being made. So just as I said, so today if you have a problem with your artery in the heart, the cardiologist has to put a wire which goes there, dilate, put a stent. Now he'll just put an injection in which some nano robots will be there. They'll go inside your body, they'll reach the specific site, carry out a pre-assigned task and come out and get delivered outside. This is already reality. So these are called nano robots which are there. And the final thing which actually is going to change the way we live or we handle our organs is something called stem cells and 3D organ printing. Just the way today you can give commands about a picture and get a picture of your choice, this is whole new world called regenerative medicine, where people take primitive cells and trigger them to develop into a specific cell line. All of you are aware, our life starts as a human embryo. A sperm and an egg, they meet, they becomes an embryo, 1 cell, 2 cell, 4 cell, 8 cell, and ultimately there is organ development. Nobody knows exactly what stimulates the same cell in different areas to develop into different organs. So some cell develops into heart, some cell develops into liver, lung, like that. But same process is now being done in the laboratory. You take a stem cell and make it develop into a different area. So this is a whole new world called organ synthesis or regenerative medicine. You can actually, all these organs, bone, skin, pancreas, heart valves, arteries, veins, cartilage, spinal cord, liver, bladder, kidney, breast, teeth, all these have already been developed in the laboratories. And a time will come when these will be available in the laboratories. You want to change your heart, you don't have to go to Dr. Venugopal to get a heart transplant done. You just go to a shop, order what you like and have it changed. So what it's doing, it's empowering the patient, it's enabling the physicians and surgeons to do better and better, it's enhancing wellness, and the mantra today is cure the well before they get sick. So that's the key thing that is happening. Instead of treating and treating in a cruel, crude way as we have been doing, either treat in a kind way or actually catch it much before that, so that there is no need for treating at all. Finally, I will just end with this video. This is a video developed by Microsoft. Sorry, I'll play it from the source. Just give me 2 more minutes. This video just shows how it's going to be in future. Yeah. This is future vision of healthcare, a video made by engineering group in Microsoft. Just watch it, I'm sure you'll understand it better than I do. stop here. Thank you very much. Idea was just to convey that we've come a long way from that era of barber surgeons. We are living in a digital medicine age, and the way we practice medicine today, where you have to go to a doctor, schedule an appointment, see him personally, do all the tests, go to the lab, all these things actually might change completely in the next 5-10 years. Everything will be through that handheld device, which I'm sure you know about that better than I do. Thank you very much, and all of you have a wonderful evening.